Maybe this has happened to you before. Maybe you're thinking, I'm not really that good at playing drums. I'm an imposter. I'm gonna get found out. Well, today we're gonna call an emergency meeting. And we're gonna talk about this feeling of being an imposter and how you can turn things around. Welcome to Al's Drum Hang. Hey everybody, welcome to Al's Drum Hang. I have to say, thank you so much for all your likes and your subscribes and your views. We've really blown up over the last couple of weeks and I really have you to thank for that. We're well on our way to where we want to be. I'm going to remind you now and at the end of the video to like, subscribe, and enable your notifications. Chances are, one time or another, that you've chalked pretty much everything good that's happened to you in your drumming career up to luck. I mean, like, it's lucky so far that nobody's found out that you're a fake, a fraud, an imposter. You're actually not alone. It's estimated that about 7 out of 10 adults living today feel this. A couple of researchers in the 1970s coined the phrase imposter syndrome to describe this feeling of inadequacy and being a fraud. Not actually being qualified to do what you're actually doing, and probably doing well in some way or another. We may have a lot of evidence that we're actually being successful in our lives, in our careers, and yes, in our drumming. And especially in our drumming, we may be in bands, we may be doing really well at shows, pulling in lots of people in the audience. We may be getting gigs, we may be recording a lot, we may be very busy. But somehow we've convinced ourselves that we're not really doing that well. And the fact that we are doing that well at all is because we're lucky. Nobody's found us out yet. Nobody's figured we don't actually know what we're doing. And before you nod your head and say, yeah, that's me, I'm really not that good, I really don't know what I'm doing, consider this. Einstein thought that he was a lousy scientist. Tom Hanks has said that he feels like a fraud sometimes. And closer to home for us musicians, Lady Gaga, David Bowie, two really extroverted showmen, have both said they feel like frauds and imposters as well. Originally, imposter syndrome was coined to describe the feeling that women got in a professional setting because they were being compared to men and because they felt they had to work harder than everybody else around them. And to some extent that's still true, but it's taken on a wider meaning for a lot more people. We've realized that almost every adult feels this way now and again, and some much worse than others. It's especially prevalent among high-performing, creative types, perfectionists, people who really hold themselves to a high level of workmanship, and that describes most musicians I know. Think about it. How many takes did you get to get that recording right? How many times did you rehearse so you'd be perfect at that show? And even then, you walked off stage and you're like, I could have done better. That's you. You are probably somewhere on the perfectionist scale, which means you probably grappled with imposter syndrome before. The worst part about imposter syndrome is that it creates a toxic cycle in our heads because we don't think we're really good enough to be doing the things we're doing. And then we start overthinking and second guessing ourselves. Imagine like when you're playing a fill, but you're thinking really obsessively about the sticking you're using. And you find yourself screwing it up over and over again because you're overthinking it. Imposter syndrome has the same effect. Imagine convincing yourself that you don't have what it takes to be the drummer for your band. And that's just going to eat you up inside until eventually your performance is going to worsen, at which point you might get fired from the band. Or imagine that you just don't have the confidence to take on gigs or recording sessions because you've convinced yourself that you're not really that good. And so you stop getting so many calls because you've turned so many calls down and word gets out. You see what I mean about a toxic cycle? And then because we are all surrounded by a lot of media, YouTube videos, and we go to shows and we see other musicians and other drummers, and it's almost impossible not to compare ourselves with them, but then we're unfair about the comparison. How many of you have seen a video of somebody really, really good at drumming, and then you close it and you're like, that's it, I quit drumming. I'll never be that good. So in another situation, you might be comparing yourself to a drummer who recently played with your band before you came on the scene, or somebody who's in your circle of musician friends who's in their own band and playing at what you perceive as a much higher level than you. Or maybe you got a sub for that one gig and that really eats at your confidence because you know that guy's a great player and you're like, what if they like him so much better than me because I'm not that good? So you see the kind of traps of thinking we can fall into with imposter syndrome, where we're just comparing ourselves, putting ourselves down, refusing to believe in our own abilities. Listen, it's okay to be modest. It's okay to be humble. And it's certainly okay to share credit with others. But when you're totally down on yourself, you refuse to believe in yourself, and you never accept any credit for anything you do well, that leads to imposter syndrome, and that leads to cycles of failure. If you keep downplaying your abilities, if you keep considering yourself not that good, if you keep shortchanging yourself and not taking credit, you're going to burn yourself out. You're going to burn out everybody around you. People who don't believe in themselves are not fun to be in bands with. They're not fun to work with, and you're not going to feel like making music because it's going to be stressful and anxiety forming. So now that we've discussed in depth what imposter syndrome is and what it feels like, let's talk about how we get over it, get through it, and get to the gig and smash it. The first thing we need to do with imposter syndrome is recognize that it's happening. See, imposter syndrome all happens in your head. You've said in your head, I'm not that good. You've said in your head, that person is so much better. You've said in your head, I'm lucky nobody's found out I'm a fraud. It's in your head. The cool thing is you own your own head. You own all of this space. So you have control over what happens in this space. You have the ability to recognize it when it's happening and say, oh, I saw that video with Al and he warned me this could happen. This is imposter syndrome. Once we've recognized it, we're in a place where we have power over it and we can do something about it. Right now, we're at a decision point. We can decide to just let it ride. We're going to be an imposter. And eventually that could get us ejected, right? It's not what we want to do. We want to decide to face it. And here's how we do that. First off, it's a good thing to just review where you are and how you got there. What have you accomplished? How many bands have you played with? What about those great shows where everybody was on about, hey, you were great, you were fantastic. The shows where you had fun, the recording sessions that went smooth, the playing engagements where you rose to the occasion. You need to keep a good mental track of those, an inventory that you can go back to at those times when you're feeling low on yourself, and they will happen. And just say, but yeah, here I was and I crushed it then. So you're not an imposter, you're just maybe having a bad day. Or you're a little down on yourself, or your hands just have the dumb. But we can recover from that, right? Get some sleep, drink some water, limber up, and get back in there with a good attitude about ourselves. Remember, if you're at the gig and there's 5 people, 50 people, 500 people, 5,000 people, it doesn't matter how many people. Anybody who's there came to see you and they came to see you crush it. They didn't come to see you fail. Nobody shows up to a show going, I hope this band sucks. I hope that drummer is really bad. Nobody does that. They came to see you be successful because they came to have fun and watch the show. It's time for you to get confident. And remember, I have a video about that. When you compare yourself to others, sometimes we really miss the mark because we're not taking into account how long that person's been playing, the amount of time that they put into playing, and what we really should be doing is comparing ourselves to ourselves. What have we learned? How have we grown? What do we do better now than we used to? I'll tell you, in the years I've been drumming and working on my drumming seriously, which is about the last 15 of this whole 35 that I talk about, that's where I really can put my finger down and say, I know my dynamics better, my tempos are much more solid, I'm listening more to the people in the band, I'm playing fewer notes that matter more. I can see that improvement and that progression in myself. And what I'm comparing myself to is myself back then. And you know what? It's better. It is a better drummer than this guy was. And that's great, right? That gives me confidence to keep moving on and keep improving. I could compare myself to somebody awesome like Neil Peart or Dean Castronovo or Simon Phillips or Gavin Harrison. But they're monster players. And I figure I've got a day job and I've got a family and I'm not on tour, however many days a year. And so there's only a limited amount of time I get to play my drums and practice my drums compared to those guys for whom it's a job. So that would be unfair to compare, right? Finally, if we are going to look at other drummers, and we're going to go to shows, we're going to watch videos, we're going to go to clinics, we are going to see other drummers. Get inspired, not intimidated. I went and saw Peter Erskine at a clinic. And you know what stuck with me more than anything about that clinic? When he said he got hired for the Austin Powers soundtrack just to go boom, like that, for a lot of the soundtrack. Well, they didn't need to hire Peter Erskine for that. They could have hired me. But what he was saying is it's okay to just lean back on what you know. And that inspired me. I've told the story in this video right here about my drumming influences, about watching Louis Bellson when I was starting out drumming. And at that point, he'd been drumming for, probably right around 35 years, 40 years, something like that. And he was a monster player. And instead of going, oh, I'll never learn to play drums that well, I said, wow, if I play drums for that long, look how good I have the potential of being. And I can tell you, 50-year-old me right now, speaking to 15-year-old me back then, could definitely say, yes, stick with it. Just learn and grow and find one thing every day that you did better. Just like Louis did. And the last thing I'm going to say about imposter syndrome is it really helps to talk to somebody trusted who's going to give you an honest opinion of you as a person and as a drummer. That might be a bandmate. It might be a drum teacher. It might be another drummer you know. It might be somebody who's not even a musician, but who cares about you and your well-being. And they can give you an honest opinion. Listen to them. Let them help you. Don't say, no, it's really not true. I'm really afraid. They know because they care. And they want you to succeed just like everybody else who comes to your shows, listens to your recordings, hires you. They want you to be successful. If you're still at a point where that's not helping, you might want to consider professionals like a therapist or a counselor who can help you deal with this. And I have to point out, and it's really important, I am not a trained mental health professional. But I've talked to a lot of people about this over the years, helped a lot of people by being that caring person in the room and saying, you really are good at this thing. You owe it to yourself to believe in yourself. You are not an imposter. You've worked hard, You put yourself into this instrument. You've tried to learn every day. People are calling you for gigs. They're coming to your shows. They're asking you to record things with them. They're asking you to do projects with them. They're asking you to write music with them. They would not be doing that if you really were the failure you think you are. You wouldn't get those calls. You wouldn't get those gigs. You wouldn't get those shows. And even if you're just in your bedroom learning for the first week or so of drums and it's hard, stick in there. It doesn't mean you're not good. It just means you might not be good yet. It doesn't matter if you're just starting out or if you're a seasoned professional. I'm here to tell you, you are the best you will ever be. You are the best you anybody can ever be. And I believe in you. Thanks for coming to my emergency meeting. I think we got rid of all the imposters. What do you think? Have you dealt with this? How did you deal with it? Did anything I said help? Do you have other ideas on how to help people who are feeling this? Let's be friends. Let's be bandmates. Drop it in the comments. Let's be supportive of each other. Again, guys, I really appreciate all the views, all the likes, all the subscribes, all the support. We're well on our way. I'm really motivated to bring you more talks like this to help people like you and like me out with these problems as we learn this instrument better and get to be better drummers and better people. Once again, don't forget to like, subscribe, enable notifications. Thanks for listening. I'm Al. This has been Al's Drum Hang, and I'll see you next time. Hey, what are you doing here? I thought we got rid of all you imposters. You're ejected.